Hello everyone and welcome to Read 585 online. This is week 7. There are only 2 parts of lectures this week. In this first part I will be discussing upcoming assignments, and then in the second part I will be reviewing readings from last week on one of my favorite topics, response to intervention. So let's talk about upcoming assignments, but first we have some good news, a celebration from Kayla, who emailed me to say I wanted to share some good news from my school site. Our level 1 ELL student, who we have been intensively working with all year to speak in either Spanish or English. She speaks Spanish, but she shows some social anxiety when communicating in Spanish with our AIDA and other students, finally broke her silent period. She marched up to me before class the other day and I asked how she was, and she proudly looked me in the eye and said, "I am fine." I have to admit I did a little dance before walking into class when she spoke. The next day she asked, "Can I have glue for her project?" Great work, Kayla. That is tremendous and shows that you are working on creating an environment to help all students achieve, which is really the focus of this week and next week, is using assessment data, using interventions to help all students achieve. So great work. Readings for week 7. There are 2. First is an article titled Making Instructional Decisions Based on Data, What, How, and Why. It comes from the reading teacher, and it is a pretty quick article, I think 6 to 8 pages, and has a model for you to apply how you can use data as a framework. The second article is titled Making the Most of Assessments to Inform Instruction. It is only 3 pages, very quick article, and it gives you some tips really for how to use assessments, as the title says, making the most of assessments. So things to consider when you're developing your assessments and using them. I'm not super in love with this article, so it may get the axe for future semesters, but still might give you some new information there. Participation activity, there is none this week, so you can really focus on assignment 3 part 2, which is due. Yes, that's right, assignment 3 part 2 due March 8th. Also be working on the feedback to your colleagues. You are going to get busy, and it is due March 22nd, so the sooner you get that done, you can cross it off your list and feel a lot better about yourself. So please be doing the feedback. All right, assignment 3 timeline. So again, there are 3 parts to this assignment. The first one you submitted a few days ago, and I'm working on getting feedback to you. The second part is due March 8th. This is where you're doing the narrative and data analysis, emphasis on data analysis. You're not just narrating your statistical findings, but you are explaining why they might be statistically significant or why they might not be statistically significant. So definitely view the screencast on how to do part 2. There are also sample papers from week 5, and then I added some new samples in the week 8 block. So if you take a look at this one, it's actually a community college sample. And with this, so this is the chart, right, that you should have already completed. Well, one thing to note here for formative assessment, last time with part 1, you did not actually need to include your assessment data here. You just had to indicate what type of data you will be collecting so that you can make a mental reminder to yourself that you need to get that data for part 2, because you're actually analyzing it in part 2. So then with part 2, you are doing your narrative. So notice how this student, right, narrates the demographic data, but then explains these demographics are similar to the overall demographics of students enrolled at community colleges in the state of California, with slightly lower numbers of African American students and Asian students and significantly higher numbers. So not only is she explaining the data, narrating it, but then explaining some key differences and significant findings with the data. Please make sure that when you submit part 2, you also include your data chart from part 1 so that I have that to reference as I read part 2. So part 1 should also come with part 2. All right, so definitely check out the samples on that. Part 3 is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats piece, and that is due March 29th. So plenty of resources, plenty of screencasts. Make sure to check those out. All right, that's all I have to say about upcoming assignments. If you have any questions, you know you can always email me.